All right, welcome to episode 48 Q&A basketball. It's been a few weeks, so thanks for joining us. We'll jump on with a few questions. So Simon, you're going to be first. Cab off the rank. Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, g'day Bogues, g'day Pro. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Just heard stories of like Tim Duncan giving advice to rookies and stuff when they're on the court, or Olajuwon, I think he was doing it to Shaq. Do you recall any times that you as a rookie just got advice from opponents, and vice versa? Did you ever give advice to young fellas when you were playing against them?
Oh, yeah, not really, man. I didn't really. I mean, maybe some veterans on my own team, but not, I mean, I was kind of more in the era where that really wasn't emphasized, you know. I think it's a bit more kind of makes the media now and people talk about it a whole lot more. But to be honest, like, especially me being, you know, number one pick and whatever, everyone was just trying to kick my ass. So I didn't get a whole lot of that. Everyone's different. I mean, you see it a whole lot more. I mean, Pro, I don't know, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it. I don't know if it's happening more these days just because it's publicized, or if it really is. I would assume it is, just because I think some of those old school guys always wanted that edge. But as far as like young guys, like if I was to play against Jock Landale, for instance, I'd definitely try to help him just because I'm friends with him and I know him. But it'd be probably more, you know, post game than it would be during the game, because I'm trying to beat him and he's trying to beat me. So, Pro, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, with Kobe never, like, it was funny how Kobe was at the end of his career and post-career, like of helping people, working out with people, working out players and stuff. I've had countless players ask me when I was working for him to work out with Kobe, and he would say, fuck no, ever. I will never work out with anybody. You know, that I'm totally against it. And like you said, I think that old school mentality of, I don't think everybody was like that. I think you had some guys that were special that sort of gave advice, but not many. You know, I didn't see it in Dallas really as far as opponents. I saw Vince Carter trying to give advice. JJ Barea tried to give advice. You know, Zaza Pachulia gave a lot of advice to Dwight Powell on defense, but I never really seen it as far as opponents. Like, you know, everybody wants to be friends with each other, so they take all these videos working out with each other and stuff. But I'll tell you what, like Bogues said, the era when he played, I don't think that was as prevalent as it is today.
Yeah, I guess it's discussed as more of a feel-good story. What a great guy, you know. He's he's given some pointers, but everyone's different. I think it's you know, the NBA today and basketball in general. It's all about clout and clicks, and you know, trying to portray being someone that you're not a lot of the times. But look, as far as, you know, if a young guy is a rookie, makes a good move on you, I've said stuff like, "Damn man, good move! Like, you got me on that one." But as far as like, "Hey, you would have got by me if you just did this," and then, you know, the next play down, the guy goes by you and scores on you. It's like, I'm trying to keep that edge of whatever I know. And like I said, if it's post game and it's someone that I like, I might say, "Hey man, I was able to do this to you. I was able to do that to you. You should try to do this." But it is an interesting question, and I think it's changing a lot. And I think now a lot of guys now being mic'd up and having one camera follow them around for a whole game at times. I think we're seeing a little bit more of that, and I think guys are cognizant of being mic'd up and bringing something interesting. I mean, Pro and I have had these discussions of when guys are mic'd up, their personality is completely different to when they're not. And that's 99% of NBA players, like completely different. There's guys that are almost mutes that don't say shit during training or games, that you put a microphone on them and they know they're mic'd up. All of a sudden, they're the most talkative person in the world and they're encouraging guys. And so, you know, it does change a little bit, but that's just, you know, the NBA's a production like Hollywood more often than not, and that's what you're kind of dealing with. So thanks for that question. Go on to the next one, Chris.
G'day guys, and same thing. Happy New Year to you both. Hope you both had a good break and all rest and recharged. Just got a couple of questions. Probably the first one that's I've sort of noticed over the last couple of seasons is, I suppose, probably what's both of your thoughts on the 82 game season. I suppose, like, you know, do you think it's too much? Do you think there should be less, or do you think it's fine the way it is? I mean, I personally think it's fine the way it is. It's the way it's always been, but you sort of hear it mentioned more and more. You know, there should be less games, and not just in NBA, but like in AFL, like they're talking about potentially having less games, playing less minutes. I suppose I just want to know your thoughts on that. And then also probably more from both your point of view. Andrew, you said you met the only person you'd sort of really been starstruck from was Michael Jordan. I suppose, how was it meeting him, and did you have much of a chance to talk to him? What did you talk about? And was he, I suppose, was he good to talk to, or did you not get much opportunity?
Yeah, thanks for that. The 82 game thing is interesting, just from the point of view of what do you do? I mean, there's not a whole lot that you can really change right now because salaries come into play. TV money is the big one. They pay based on 82 games plus playoffs plus preseason. So there's a lot that would have to change for them to really, I guess, I doubt they'll ever go less. I mean, we've got in the run sheet for the podcast a little bit later. There's that $1 million prize pool now per player for the winning team of an in-game tournament that they're floating. So they're aware of trying to change things up a little bit, but I mean, I think you need the games. You need, in the market the US is in, with baseball and hockey competing probably with the same amount. I mean, baseball's double the amount of games and hockey's roughly the same as the NBA. I think football's the outlier, right? They play one game a week. There's a lot of hype in that game, and they actually draw more eyeballs doing that. But I think the NBA definitely can't take a backward step games wise, and no matter how many games you have, there's always going to be teams manipulating it for rest and minutes. And like you said, AFL, people complaining about minutes and load. I mean, if you had 50 games, there'd be teams resting guys, 10 games out of those 50 at times strategically. So I don't think that's going to change. I think I think there is a lot of games that don't matter, especially it's more towards the end of that season. Like you look right now, like are you going to go to a Detroit versus OKC game in January, February and get your money's worth? Probably not. It's probably not a game you want to go to because the wins and losses don't matter. They're both doing janky things with lineups. They're trying to develop. They're potentially tanking. So that's where I think it gets messy. But the 82 games are fine if it's, I guess that's why they've made it a 10-game, play-in playoffs to try and keep 2 or 3 more teams engaged rather than going to tank mode. Pro, what are your thoughts around the 82-game mark?
I'm totally for a shorter season, obviously, because more of the games will matter. But you just have a big percentage of the games that don't matter. Let's be honest. It doesn't matter how many games you shorten it up. But you have to look at it realistically. Financially, the players would have to take pay cuts and the salaries would have to go down because remember, everything, the whole salary structure of the whole league is basketball-related income. Like all the money from ticket sales and TV revenue and jersey sales, blah, 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 go into one pot. 50% go to players, 50% go to owners. Basically, 50% of the ownership stuff is basically, it's more for the players. So 50% of what the players get is their share is divided up by 30, and that's what your salary cap is. So if you play less games, it's less revenue coming into the league, and less revenue coming into the league means shorter, less contracts, because you can't spend. The mid-level exception goes down, the average salary goes down. So I just can't do it. I just can't see it done logically. I think it's too many games, but like Bogues said, I think they'd manipulate it and. But I just think that you can't do it financially. The league can't do it now. Just because it's all money, it's all based on money, and I just can't see it going down from the 82 game structure they got now.
Yeah, then you factor in betting, you factor in international league pass and league pass, streams over in China, whatever it is. There's big ramifications with less games. I'll be interested to see if they do pass this in-game tournament, what that looks like, how many more games that is, and if that actually makes the regular season games less. If they say, all right, we're only going to do 70 regular season games because we're adding 10 here, or whether they keep the 82 the same. The other problem with the 82 changing, and we've seen it in the NBL over the last 20, 30 years, is when the number of games change per season, the record holder stuff changes immensely. So now if you go to a 60-game season, it's like no one's ever catching Steph Curry's 3-point record. Like that's going to stay forever. Minutes played, rebounds, like some of the stats, Abdul-Jabbar's leading the all-time leading scorer, like that's never going to get even challenged if you go to a lesser game. So, and we've seen that in the NBL with 48 minutes now to 40 minutes. And there are some seasons back in the 90s and 2000s that had more than 28, 30 games. So that can change things as well when you start debating, all-time greats and all-time numbers. That goes out the window then you're all of a sudden you're starting fresh, and that's interesting. And then just to round off, meeting MJ, I mean, obviously for me, he's the greatest basketball player ever, and was kind of, I grew up in, I'm a 80s, 90s baby. So my teenage adolescence was in the 90s, and it was MJ. Everything was MJ. Everything you watched was Michael Jordan. Didn't like baseball at all, but you kind of even had an eye on the baseball when he went there for a season, So meeting him wasn't the best setting to meet him. I met him at a jump man all-star party. So I think it was my rookie year. I was at the rookie sophomore game, and he has an event at every all-star game where they basically, have all the people that are sponsored by Jordan. And I got an invite to go there because I was a Nike athlete, and basically saw MJ and had a chat to him for a couple of minutes. And I just remember how big the dude's hands were. That's all I remember. I was like, he's a guard, and his hands were twice the size of mine. So he was fine. Like, we had a quick chat. He said he followed my college career and was a fan and all that kind of stuff. And that was kind of shut me up pretty quickly that Michael Jordan even knew who I was. But yeah, it wasn't really the right setting to sit down and have some drinks, anything like that. It was loud music playing in the background, all kinds of shit going on, bro.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Jordan was the guy for me that I was starstruck with, and I'm not starstruck by many people at all. It was a surreal to sort of meet him. I worked his camp out in Santa Barbara, California, and he's around all the time. He's around in the morning, afternoon and night, like he's around about 2-hour block. And he's pretty interesting dude. I'll tell you, like, you could tell he's hardened over the years as far as like people asking him for things and stuff. So anytime somebody he doesn't really know goes up, he's probably assuming that they're going to ask him for something, picture, autograph, whatever. So when I went up to him, I was like, "Hey, MJ, do you mind if we talk footwork?" And he goes, "Footwear?" So I was like, "Oh fuck, this guy thinks I want shoes." I go, No, footwork. And I'll tell you what, that fucking guy, and he's a guy that keeps it moving. Like, he doesn't really carry many conversations with people. He always keeps it moving. And he stood there with me for like 10 minutes, demonstrating, talking. Like, it was pretty cool to sort of talk shop with him over the years about feet and offense and things like that, and talk about players and stuff. He was pretty cool. The only guy closest to that, Bogues, is the day President Obama got elected. He had a game in Chicago that he brought in like 50 people and played at the Attack Center with Grover, our facility in Chicago, and getting a chance to see I've never been that close to a president. He was about to get sworn in that night, and I thought that was pretty cool just to sort of see him in that environment, whatever. But yeah, MJ, everybody's, if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, it's, I can't see anybody else really, having that impact on you like he did. He's pretty cool guy.
Yeah, no doubt. A lot of people would have him on the top of the list. All right, JF, we're going to move on to you. Next question. Unmute and fire away.
Yo, Bogues, Pro, what's up? By the way, loving the timeline, Andrew. Just, I'm a bit of a tennis fan, and what a fucking shit show is going on.
It is.
It is. It's just like your Twitter line is so like sad and funny. I'm here in Canada. It's just as bad, but luckily we have the U.S. border to bring some sanity to us.
Yeah, well, he's got the for those not familiar, Djokovic got into the country, got granted permits, then the country took him away because of public backlash around vaccination status and whatnot. But there's a big live streamed, I believe, court hearing tomorrow, which will give us the answer of whether he's allowed to stay and grace our shores. So anyway, move on to your basketball.
What's your prediction, anyways, about tomorrow?
I don't trust anything being not corrupt in this country at this point. Really. It's a grain of salt. So I would not be surprised if they see him back just based on public backlash and media pressure. But I am a glass half full guy, as Pro knows. So I just don't believe anything that's common sense is going to come out common sense.
Yeah, I bet on your perspective as well. So I'm kind of curious. You guys were, I think your interview with Jacques Landale was really interesting. And you kind of mentioned he was just playing hoops and getting recruited by that college, St. Mary's.
Yep.
And I'm just curious about your, experience playing pickup. Like, you're a 7 foot tall dude. You're obviously famous now. Like, how does that even work? Like, when you go into gyms, what's the kind of response? Do you still play?
My response, I guess, around pickup, I was never a fan of just pick up just to play. Even when I was a pro, I wasn't a fan of just showing up to a gym with no structure and just playing. And the main reason for that was because it just at least in the US, here too in Australia, to be honest with you, it just becomes a one-on-one game with whoever just made the last shot, gets an ISO the next possession until they stop missing. And it's not really pure basketball. It's a bit of conditioning, running up and down, quote unquote, getting your work in. And I wasn't a huge fan of playing pickup for that reason. I'd rather play like maybe 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 in the off season or some 1-on-1. But the 5-on-5 stuff, to me, I think there's better use of your off season training and time. And then, like today, I don't play. I mean, I haven't played 5-on-5 since I retired, and I doubt I will. Like, I'm not going up and down right now and putting the body through that because I haven't done it in so long. But I anticipate one day I will get back out there and just try to, just work up a bit of a sweat. But the open gym stuff, just not a fan of it, and it doesn't really. Early on in my career, I was probably more predicated towards being able to go 1-on-1, but mid to late career, I was much more, my strengths were much more aligned to team basketball and read and react and all that kind of stuff, which you do maybe 1% of the time, in pickup basketball pro. What are your thoughts around pickup?
It used to be pretty good depending on where you played. Like with Grover, we'd have all our clients work out like on the basketball court with me and then work out in the weight room with him. And then they would come back at like 1 o'clock to play pickup. We had NBA referees. Guys sort of took it serious. The games were really good, probably until the end of the summer when guys started going back to their teams and then the games wasn't as good. But like we would have 18, 20 NBA guys in the gym ready to really compete, Jawan Howard, Michael Finley, guys like that, Bobby Simmons, Dwayne Wade, and Sean Marion, Andre Iguodala, guys like that. And the games were really good. But like we had like score clocks and shot clocks and, like I said, 3 referees working the games, and it was really good. But then you go to other places now, UCLA and some other runs. The runs are just like ISO after ISO after ISO. The games aren't very good. And, I just don't know. Like you go for the, run up and down. A lot of the teams go to, California now, so they play pickup. Before COVID, they would send their whole team down. Team would work out in the morning and then play at UCLA in the afternoon just for a team bonding deal. So they would all be on the same court together and things like that. That's pretty cool. But like the games today, like you said, you pointed out earlier, it's just you don't really get much out of it because it's just ISO. Everybody's just trying to do, it's like NBA game on steroids. Like, where just guys just launching up shots and there's really no structure to it. And yeah, I'm not really a huge fan of it. I just don't think there are enough guys who would take it serious to want to get a high level run. But I'm just not a huge fan of it these days. I think if you work out, play 1-on-1 against guys that really want to compete, that's not bad. Maybe some 2-on-2 if you cat it, 3-on-3 if you're lucky. But the 5-on-5 stuff, it's just like everybody's a friend fest and everybody's. It's not really, I don't know if you get much out of it, to be honest with you, like you used to. Like those UCLA runs back in the day with like Magic Johnson and Reggie Miller and James Worthy and, Mark Jackson, Chris Mullin, guys like that. I mean, those games are really good, back, because those guys competed and it meant something. I don't think it means as much, I think it's just showing up and, you have your photographer that, comes and takes pictures of you for your Instagram account. And stuff like that. It just becomes less and less about really getting better and more about, let's be honest, Bogues, like these days development in the United States for NBA players and even high school and college, it's all trainer driven anyway. It's all individual offense. It's all getting up shots. It's not really learning how to play structure, situation. And that's why our skill level's at an all-time high and our basketball IQ's at an all-time low, across the board. And I think that's a big reason because they don't really play anymore anyway. And then when they do, it's a friend fest, in my opinion. That's just my observation.
Yeah, it can build bad habits as well, playing too much pickup in the off season, especially where it's that free flowing, just no real kind of discipline about fundamentals or technique and that kind of stuff. So I think it has its, I know a lot of guys would use it to try new moves, like, that they'd worked on in the off season. They might be maybe, stretching out to 3. They might be working on pull-ups off the dribble. And a lot of guys would work on that in the off season, then try to use it in the pickup game. So there's another aspect that it's not unique to their strengths. But the other thing in pickups is if you've got guys that are just junkyard dog types, they usually dominate those games, which is always hilarious to watch. Like guys that are just all effort guys on an NBA roster, like Quincy Acey was probably an example. I remember when I was in Dallas, when I came in and watching being involved in the scrimmages, he was just dominating because he only played one way, and that was 110%. And if you come in with 110% effort in those scrimmages, you're going to have 40 and 40. And he looked like the MVP every day in the scrimmages because he was just giving 100% effort. Whereas guys were maybe coming off rehab stuff, guys were coasting back into, I'm going to give about 70, 80%. And you got a guy going 110. It's glaring how much they dominate. So, I'm not a huge fan. I think time and place a little bit, but like Pro said, I'd rather get my work in skill-wise and maybe do some 2-on-2, 3-on-3. Maybe every now and then you get a run in. I think guys, smart trainers will break it up a little bit where you don't want to be doing individuals every day for 5 months in the off-season or 4 months in the off-season because it becomes monotonous in a way. So I think sometimes it's just good to just be like, okay, go and just have some fun and play some 5-on-5. But on the flip side, you don't want to be doing that shit every day because you will build bad habits. All right, James.
G'day, Andrew, and g'day, Pro. Just a question about Andrew Wiggins, the Golden State Warriors. I feel like he's come in and he's really, like he got traded and then he's sort of turned himself around and being involved in the culture of Golden State. But the question is, who sets the culture of the organisation, the front office, coaches or players?
Every team's kind of different. I think the best cultures that I've been a part of, I've been on record saying this, is culture driven by players. When you have players that first and foremost know where they're at in their career, so they know, hey, this is me, this is my strength, this is what I need to do to help my team win. You've got young guys that bring the energy. You've got role players that understand their role, and obviously it helps to have a Steph Curry and Klay Thompson on the squad. But Wiggins has been really, really good. He let's not forget he's a max player, so I think the bar was set very, very high. He was on some really bad teams in Minnesota where I think that culture was probably a culture shock for him. The guys, from what I understand, that I've spoken to, love him. They think he's a great guy in the locker room. He comes in, he works hard. He's not a bad guy whatsoever, and they really enjoy his professionalism. And I think he kind of got a bit of a bad rap just because of that max deal in Minnesota. Whereas now I think it just seems like he's just playing. He's just fitting in. He's a pretty good defender for him. He's starting to make some good shots. He's got a bit of athleticism for him on that wing as well. And I'm going to be interested to see how he, he's fringe all-star right now. I know they're really pushing him to be in that team, and based on Golden State's record, they might get 3 in there. Maybe he could be that third point flip in my opinion. But interested to see with Klay coming back if he continues the role and run and minutes that he has had so far this season. But I like him. I think he fits in well, and it just goes to show you, sometimes culture and fit can make a big difference on kind of the way you're playing. And I haven't looked at the numbers, but off the top of my head, I would assume his numbers probably aren't glaringly any different than they were in Minnesota, but he looks like a much different player and they're winning games. So yeah, to answer your question, it's said a lot by the players. Management play their part, and they, I guess, provide the framework. Like, here's a framework of who we are, what we want to do. These are the things that are non-negotiables. You show up late, it's a fine. You don't get your work in, we're going to ask you questions why. Get your weight room stuff in, get your rehab stuff in, whatever it is. They set the framework, and then the players, when teams that have the players that police it and keep it in-house, they're generally the best teams. If it gets to a point where management has to come in and be like, hey, we're finding you because you did X, Y, Z, or the coach has to rah-rah every other day, those teams are going to suck over the course of 82 games just because it becomes like glorified babysitting, and those teams never do very, very well long-term. They'll have ebbs and flows, whereas teams where it's, self-managed and guys are like, nah, man, that's bullshit. We call it out. You put your hand up and say, yep, I screwed up, and then we get on with life. They're the best teams to be a part of. Pro, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, I think that you said, the front office, coaching staff, what have you. I think it's more coaching staff. Well, I think the front office picks the players, so they got to do the best job that they can, bringing in people that, will really work hard, will try to be coachable to the best of their ability. And, you're not going to be perfect all the time, but obviously they're the first layer of it. Now it's the coaching staff that has to sort of deal with them every day. They have to be the ones that keep people accountable, hold them accountable on a daily basis. Front office really doesn't have much to do with that, where you have to make sure people are on time, doing what they got to do, being coachable, doing the right things. But in reality, the players are the ones that really set the tone, because the players are the ones that are going to figure out, are we going to really play for this guy? Are we going to listen to him? Are we going to act accordingly? If they don't, there's nothing you can do. I don't care, but your fines are nothing. You can only fine players so much money, and it's not really going to be that much, especially to the max players. So they got to really police it, and they're the ones that really push the culture of things. With Wiggins, I think Wiggins is doing very well. I think Wiggins is great in this role of being that second or third guy. I think that being the best player on the team really doesn't fit him, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but I've been watching him for a while. I thought he was going to be like a Joe Johnson type when he came into the league. He could really score. He could isolate. He was an athlete. I think he's really good at being that guy that he could play off Steph. Now he could play off Draymond a little bit. He could play off of Clay when he comes back, and I think that he could really be more of an efficient player, a more of an efficient scorer. You could really maximize his potential being in the role that he's in. And there's going to be, out of an 82 game schedule, there's going to be 10, 12 games where he's going to carry you. And I think the other games, he'll just be solid. And I think that's all you want from him, is consistency. And I think throughout his career, he hasn't really been a consistent player. He's put up good numbers, not great. And in huge games and huge situations, he wasn't really one to rise to the occasion. Now he doesn't have to have that on a daily basis. So he could really dominate in his little role that he had, not little, but his sort of a little bit of a reduced role. And that's not a knock on him at all. I think he's a really good player. He's a borderline all-star. I think he's like your second or third best player, and he could really do well for you. But I don't think he's that marquee player, a top 20 player, top 15 guy. But I think he's somebody who could really, like I said, carry the mail for you 10, 12 games a year, where he looks like a max player. And then the rest of the time, he could be that consistent player when he's playing off of Steph and Draymond and Clay when he's back.
Yeah, an underrated move, I think, for Golden State. A lot of people didn't really understand it, but I think Wiggins is a much better fit for that unit than D'Angelo Russell was. So I think it was, it's just a somewhat a discussion that's being swept under the rug. No one's really mentioned, I think, the Warriors and Bob Myers to do that, where when you first saw it, it's like, does it move the needle for any team that much? Probably not. But I think from a cultural point of view, I think they realize, we need to get someone who fits in better with Steph, Clay, and Draymond and what we're trying to do here. And I think with the salary they had to eat of D'Angelo Russells, I think getting Wiggins back was a good move. All right, Cupcakes O'Callaghan, let's see if we can get you on.
Man, I got the damn hands of Anders Biendrich every time I try to unmute myself and hang up on this. What's up, fellas?
What's going on?
Hey, I was listening to this interview that Patty Mills did with Fran Fraschilla a couple weeks back, and Mills was talking about the indigenous basketball league that he was starting up down there, which seems like a pretty cool and worthwhile, deal on a lot of levels. And it kind of got me thinking about how the seeds, basketball seeds, are planted in any given community, at a grassroots level, and how you never know, 30, 40, 50 years down the line what that looks like. Your boy Strauss has written about China. China is, you could say, is dead or dying from just the talent perspective, where other places are flourishing. And I'm wondering, where would you guys, if you could plant any seed, in any fertile basketball ground, just from a develop players, develop national team, high-level players, where are you going? And let's say, to keep it interesting, Africa's off the table because NBA Africa is already got its thing going there.
Well, what's left? I mean, you got NBA Europe, you got Asia, and you got Australia, really, right? I mean, is that it? Unless you go on Antarctica or something.
Well, you know what? it got me thinking, and
oh boy, this is fucking dangerous.
Well, yeah, it always is. It always. So, like, 1 out of 6 Samoan dudes plays in the NFL or some ratio like that. Like, so Tongan, Samoan, Polynesian. Like, I would have said the game's changed, like, maybe 10, 15 years ago. But now with the way centers are smaller, like, you look at Zion, like, first time I saw Zion, I thought he was like a Tongan nose guard, Chuck Hayes. I feel like there's a lot of natural athletic potential in the South Pacific. It's closer to you. What do you think?
Maybe, but I mean, body type plays a big part. As you just mentioned, Tongans, Samoans, even Maoris to an extent, Islanders, quote unquote, much more gravity challenged, but big, strong, physical, but not very long, right? Their physiques historically aren't long and gangly, which you'd require for basketball. So I think that's the problem, but can do some damage. Do you know who Pero Cameron is?
Oh yeah, the Kiwi from back in the day, right?
So he was Pero Cameron. For those that don't know, was a beast because he was the size of a brick shit house. So, he was, like a big dude, rugby player type body, had real good touch, but short arms, like short limbed, but just big dude. And all he would do, they'd run kind of Princeton type action with him at the top of the paint. He'd just be lighting people up in kind of chin cuts and flex cuts. And as soon as you'd help off, because you'd have to help because he was so big to get around, the guy guarding him would have to bump a cutter for a second. He'd just pop and shoot a three. So yeah, there is, but as far as development, look, there's still some parts of Europe that just don't have probably the amount of money or infrastructure or funding, probably similar to NBA Africa, why we're seeing such a push there, that just don't have those facilities to actually get kids that are very talented, to put them in organized structure to maybe take that next step and develop young guys individually into being, the best in their city or country, or maybe going over to college or the NBA. And Europe and Africa are probably the two where there's so much potential there. You look at what Europe does with the facilities that they have accessible, it's unbelievable. Some of the facilities they have there aren't great by any means, and they continue to develop. So you look at then what the facilities that the US has compared to that, or even Australia, they punch above their weight when you factor that in. So yeah, it's a tough one. I don't think there's anywhere left really. I mean, you said NBA Africa. It's just like where else do you go? I mean, I think the world.
Well, so I got a couple for you. And Pro, I'd be curious to hear. Even within Europe, like you look at the tallest. Obviously. Your folk in the Balkans are among the tallest, but then like all of those Norse dudes, Sweden,
Nordic,
Denmark, all of those Viking kind of like, they're all, I was even just as a joke, cause like all of my Irish family, I was thinking like, what does basketball even look like in Ireland? Like all of my Irish family are the opposite size and shape you would want in a basketball player. But I flipped on one of those games, dude. Like I think they were in Cyprus, and surprising, taller than you. There's a couple like Mark Worthington, like could maybe be NBL players, I think. But the thing that's interesting about Ireland too is like you can be an Irish citizen if your great grandparent. It's not that far back, so like. All the American, if we're just talking just national teams, like Pat Connaughton, McConnell, all those dudes could play for Ireland. But yeah, I think there's still, I mean, it takes time too, right? 20, 30 years. I mean, Australia, look at Australia 40 years ago.
Exactly. And that's the thing, like Australia, like, man, we had Luke Longley was the Lone Ranger that had a long career. I think he played 10 years and he had a long career, and he was the only guy that really did it for a long amount of time, where, now we've got, 10, 15 guys over the last 10 years that have actually, had a career for more than 2 or 3 years in there. So it comes down to that. It comes down to guys like myself, and then Ben coming in, and then Paddy and Joey, and different journeys that haven't all been textbook. Like, some of those guys weren't drafted. Some of them were high picks. So I guess giving kids the opportunity to see that you can make it regardless. I think more and more people come down the pipeline, but I think the world is so accessible now that to find that new untapped city or talent, I think is probably going to be hard to do. But and that's for people everywhere, and that's the other thing you figure out. Like no matter how small a culture or nationality is, there's always going to be outliers, and there's going to be some. You look at Yao Ming, not the prototypical kind of size and weight of an Asian or a Chinese player, and just an absolute huge human being. So there's outliers, Pro, and I guess where would one place be, Pro, that you think's untapped anywhere left?
I don't really think so, Bogues, to be honest. I mean, you get some of those things that, Cupcakes mentioned and what have you, but it's unbelievable with the Chinese thing, though, that they haven't really been able to get that off the ground. I mean, there's so many big guys. There's so many. Their facilities are not as good as the United States, but it's pretty close. It's 70%, like their practice facilities, all these facilities they have all over the country, all over the continent of Asia is
number
crazy.
One sport by far, right? And the amount of money they spend, you're right. Like China should be way further than they are. Like they inject a lot of fucking money in basketball.
I was in a global Nike meeting back in like 2007. George Raveling, who ran Nike basketball at the time, was like, I just got back from China. Their government basically mandated there's 100,000 villages or cities, towns, and villages across China. And they want to put a basketball hoop in every one of them, to make sure that that's the number one sport. They're putting all this money, all this funding. I just think it's like anything else, Bogues, when you're talking about government of anywhere. I just think like all that money, I think that it just gets the politics that get involved in actually like what the product's going to be, being organized, like having who's going to run it and the balance of power with that. And you don't get the right people involved in the actual development. Like, and I've been over there a bunch, like camps for Nike for like 10 years. And there is talent for sure. But I just think that like the physical, first of all, like strength and conditioning, that's a big struggle. The physicality of the game they struggle with. But like the skill level is very good. Like there are players that are in the top level of their country that are pretty good. They're NBA prospects for sure. But I think it's like dealing with the physicality of it. And it's a different type of culture over there, obviously. And I think that there's so many. I forgot how many 7-footers they said there was in that country. It was something astonishing. I want to say 100,000, but I could be wrong. But they said it was a big number. I remember when I was told, I was like, what the fuck? Like, there's a lot of talent over there. And I just think, like, the coaching struggles over there. I don't think the coaching is very good. That's why that most of these Chinese teams have American consultants consulting in development and consulting, in the coaching part of it. And I think that if the money was relegated in the right spot and you brought in the right group of 30 coaches, 40 coaches in strength, in basketball, in development, that they would have made a much bigger jump in the last 20 years or so, like they wanted to. But just like anything else, I think it all gets fucked up because the money fucks it up, the government, all of this stuff, like not the government, but the politics of it. I think it really diminishes what they were trying to do.
Yeah, I think so. And they were close, like really, really close. So the 2004, 5, 6 to about 10, as Yao Ming was in his prime and kind of phasing out. They had Iwan Lian, they had a couple of players coming through. It looked like it was one or two was going to get there, and it was sputtering, and then it fell flat again. And now they're at a position where they're back to square one, considering. But it's interesting just considering that if Australia had one iota of that funding put toward basketball, I think we'd be doing much, much better. But that's a story for another day. Anyway, that wraps up episode 48 of our Q&A. Appreciate everyone joining us again. We will now jump onto our podcast, and we will see you all next week.
Later, guys.